Welcome to the People Analytics and Future Work podcast with Adamsen.
Hi, this is Adamsen, founder and executive director of the Talent Strategy Institute, and I'm here today with Manish Goel of TrustSphere. Manish, you there?
I am indeed, Al. How are you?
I'm doing outstanding. Thanks for joining me today. Now, Manish, you have been in the people analytics space for quite some time, and in particular, you've focused in the recent years on organizational network analysis, which is a very hot topic in the space. What is organizational network analysis? And if you can give some context into how you got into the space as well, I'm super curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So ONA, or organizational network analysis, and organizational network analytics, sometimes is also known as social network analytics. But effectively, what it is an understanding of how an organization actually functions. So it's a way of being able to, in a structured way, being able to sort of visualize how communication flows occur within an organization, and how work actually gets done, how information flows occur, and how decision flows occur through an organization. So, and the way it's interesting, the way that TrustSphere got started in network analytics, or ONA, was actually through with working with a number of clients around risk. So we were working with some very large organizations, and they had asked us to understand networks of trust. They were being attacked from a network perspective across a variety of different threat vectors. And they asked us to be able to build a piece of technology or help them solve which individuals within an organization were trusted and which ones they had no information about. So we built a piece of technology that did that, and we effectively took that core piece of technology and evolved it into what today is an ONA platform.
Wow. Now, ONA, as I mentioned, is getting a lot of attention right now in the space. So why do you think that is? You mentioned risk. I mean, what's the appeal?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's this. I think that organizations are fundamentally changing the way they work. Organizations are becoming much more agile. We talk about organizations going through digital transformation. We go through workforce transformation. Ultimately, it's this. ONA becomes an important way of understanding how organizations truly function, not just the structured, not just the hierarchy or the structures that existed in the past. We know that they themselves, whilst useful, aren't the way that organizations act, how work actually gets done in organizations. And I think ONA provides a real sense as to how work truly gets done. So it's, identifying, for instance, who are the influencers within an organization and how teams are actually collaborating.
It's super interesting. And it's also, the case where here we are in 2017 and people analytics has broadened in its scope. In other words, there's a variety of analytical disciplines, there's a variety of tools. Yet, why is ONA a priority among all those different options, whether it be, doing dashboarding and maybe structural equation modeling to do, linkage between employee experience and business value? Why is ONA, should it be elevated to a high, if not the highest priority in a people analytics agenda?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I think for organizations, particularly large organizations, one of the biggest issues that anybody who is managing that workforce has is really understanding how the organization works. I mean, one of my favorite movies is Moneyball, and in many ways, it's a little bit like that. Being able to understand how an organization works based on metrics and numbers becomes really important. And that sort of supports the whole people analytics thesis. If you look at what ONA is part of that overall infrastructure, or as part of that overall sort of mosaic, is all about understanding individual behaviors and team behaviors. And the reason I think it becomes really important for ONA to be elevated right now is if you're looking at doing any sort of workforce transformation, or you're looking at any level of digital transformation, whether it be better understanding your customers or better understanding the way that your teams are interacting with one another, better understanding who your real influencers are, or who the stars are within your organization, or who the high potentials are, being able to do that using data becomes much more powerful and much more objective than doing it simply using intuition.
Now, you're starting to touch on this. What ultimately is the business case for ONA? Is if someone is saying, "Hey, I've heard about this. It makes sense, doing this relational analytics. I can see how it could add value," but at the end of the day, maybe the leaders that are going to be writing the check don't have a clear understanding of the business impact. What would you advise to tell that story and build that business case?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the way that we've taken our overall thesis around this is around applied analytics. So applied analytics means it's got to be outcome driven and it's got to be useful. So doing analytics for the sake of analytics is interesting. Doing analytics for the sake of making a business impact is powerful. So a large number of our use cases are very much outcome driven. A couple of really simple cases that clients of ours have found themselves being able to use as the basis for building an ROI or demonstrating returns on the investment in technology are around three things. One is around identifying influencers or hidden influencers or hidden stars. Second one's around transitions, being able to really help understand, how do you actually make transitions and improve the speed of onboarding for new staff. And the third one is really about leveraging effectively the social capital, the collective social capital of the organization. And if I want to just touch on that for a second, I think one of the things that we all recognize is that in business, it's not just what you know, but also who you know that matters. And in many ways, when we talk about organizations and we talk about their value, or we talk about, individuals and how valuable they are to an organization, often we say, hey, John's really well connected, or Al is incredibly well connected, but no one to date has put any real scalable science behind it. There's a number of academics, I believe, I know, who have put a lot of work into understanding the value of networks, but nobody to date has actually put a level of science at scale to be able to do this for an organization. And that, to a large extent, is what we're doing. But coming back to the use cases, those sort of three use cases are really important as being able to build a case for how and why you use ONA. And what we're also finding is that clients of ours often want to get started using ONA, and as they start to use ONA, they start to use the network or understanding of the network in ways that we sometimes had not even realized.
Now, what I'm hearing is that leaders ultimately can more consciously manage their organization, invest in the people and in the processes that are going to drive value, whether that be derived through business continuity, by team cohesiveness, and ultimately, given that organizations are fluid over time and there's mergers, acquisitions, there's downsizings on occasion, it seems like ONA can help with all those transformations over time. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, the modern enterprise, and particularly one that's geographically dispersed, and it's relatively large, is very difficult for an individual, for any individual or a team to fully comprehend. I guess the way that we like to position what TrustSphere does is it's almost like an MRI for the organization. So you can see how the organization is actually flowing and how it works, and you can then use it, as you were describing, to do a number of interventions to see how changes can be made, and you can then see once again how that organization is now flowing, how information is now flowing across that organization, and what impact it had on organizational performance and organizational effectiveness.
Got it. Now, if we can take a step down, if you will, into the weeds, how does this happen? Where's the data coming from? And we can start there.
Yeah.
Right.
So our approach to ONA is what we'd call observed ONA. And observed ONA is this: we look at communication flows. So email, voice, IM, etc. So social internal social network traffic. What we're able to do is understand through the communication flows that are occurring in an organization how an organization actually works. So what we're doing is really, if you look at it, we're taking simply the metadata, which means we don't look at content. We never analyze content by design. We don't even look at subject lines or IM messages. What we're understanding is the interactions that are going on between individuals and between teams within an organization. And that's how we get our fundamental data. And again, O&A, if you look at observed O&A, a number of academics have been, sort of working around have been working around O&A for a number of years. The difference is we're applying technology in a way to benignly understand what's going on, so gather that data, put it through our analytics engine, and then push the data back out into useful ways of being able to understand how the organization's working.
Got it. So if I can replay that, you're taking data that's based on employee activity. And so what they're actually doing and saying, as opposed to what they might report in a survey where that would be, maybe about the should, about what they want to hear as opposed to how they're really thinking or feeling.
Absolutely. I mean, the way we describe that is surveys are great at telling you what people feel. What we're doing is showing you what people are doing. So at the end of the day, we're giving you an understanding of behaviors. And I think there's one point I would like to make, which is, we make a big distinction between connections and relationships. And, connections, if you think about LinkedIn, most of your audience will be on LinkedIn. Most people will have somewhere between 500 and 1,500, sort of contacts. Think about how many of those connections are real relationships. There's a small number of those that are relationships. And effectively what we're doing at TrustSphere is distinguishing between mere connections and real relationships. And we're doing that by observing the way that people are communicating. So it's not just frequency of communication, but really understanding the way and the mode in which they're communicating. So to put a little color on that, we look at things like, how long have I known you? How frequently do we correspond? Do you write to me when I write to you? How quickly do you respond? Are you in an email? Are you in the to or the CC or the BCC lines? And things like that. So we pick up a bunch of interesting pieces around without analyzing the content, without looking at subjects. So not listening to what people are talking about, but just understanding the way in which they're interacting gives us a significant amount of insight into whether there's a relationship between someone or not.
Got it. And it begs the question, how does this respect an individual's privacy and not affect their day-to-day behavior if they feel like they're being watched? Do you see any data being skewed? I mean, just to make it more simple, is there a creepiness factor that you are seeing, and what's your view on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we talk to clients, generally speaking, the very first reaction that comes through is, "Oh, this is creepy. This could be creepy." What's important to us at TrustSphere is to make sure that this isn't. And the way that we do that is by, as I said, we never listen to what people are saying. We're only observing the interactions across the network. So by doing that, the other thing we're doing is we're only ever looking at corporate data. So we're only looking at what's going through the corporate networks. We're not looking at people's personal accounts. So we're only looking at, for example, if it was, if the organization was GE, we'd only be looking at ge.com. We wouldn't be looking at we're looking at emails from ge.com. We wouldn't be looking at people's personal emails. And again, we're only looking at corporate infrastructure. So generally speaking, in most organizations, the organization has access to that employee data anyway, that communication data anyway. By not looking at content and not looking at subject lines, we're respecting individuals' privacy. Coming back to one other point that you did make, which is interesting, do we ever notice that when people know that it's being turned on, that their behaviors change? Sometimes known as the Hawthorne effect. Sometimes we see a little bit of that, but the way that the algorithms have been set up is we're looking at conversations. So even if someone was trying to game the system or change their behavior or modify their behavior, it doesn't, because it requires two-way communication that's going on, it's much more difficult for someone to game the system.
Got it. And I'm writing my own narrative here, but tell me if I'm wrong. This is of particular value to larger enterprises, or does size really matter here?
So what we find is this: there, obviously, the problems that we resolve with from O&A magnify its scale, so they intensify its scale. So the larger the organization, the bigger, the more impact we can have. However, we're finding, and so the largest clients that we've dealt with, are over several 100,000 employees. What we do find, though, is even organizations as small as sort of 500 to 1,000 employees start to feel the benefit of this, particularly if in some of the smaller organizations, if they're geographically dispersed, because increasingly teams that are working together aren't all co-located, and because they're not co-located, there's an increasing dependence on digital communication to foster collaboration. And again, we're looking at this from both an egocentric perspective, so an individual's perspective, or from a network perspective, so from a team perspective. So we can see both views on that.
Got it. And I'm going to toggle just a little bit, if I may, because one of the themes Josh Bersin has been putting forth, and it's something that I have been strongly emphasizing over the years as well, is that what's the value proposition for the employees themselves? If they're providing this data for organizational benefit, how can they benefit as a result? Now, obviously, an organization's talent strategy can be improved to elevate the employee experience and a number of things, and if that's the case, great. But are you either delivering or working to deliver a value proposition at more micro levels, whether that be at the team level or individual level? Because again, what's the incentive, if there is one, for employees to be authentic and fearless when they're corresponding internally?
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I'm glad you raised that. For us, democratizing this data is as important as allowing it or enabling it to be used for workforce planning. So we have tools and technology that's designed specifically to allow people to manage their relationships better. If you think about this, for most sales and business development people in particular, they tend to forget more people than they remember. Mm-hmm. What we've built tools which help them manage their networks much more effectively, their work networks, which allow them to actually perform their duties and their roles and their responsibilities much better than they would without the technology. A lot about some of the theory behind our technologies. Are you familiar with the Dunbar number?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the Dunbar number of 150, which really is so for those of you who don't know the Dunbar number, there was an anthropologist named Professor Robin Dunbar, and what he did is some work around different communities. What he recognized was that the human neocortex can handle only a certain number of relationships at any one point in time, and that number, without going into the long story, worked out to be around 150. In fact, the mean was about 100, was 148, and the range was between around 100 and 220. But the mean was 148. It's been rounded to 150. In many ways, we see that our technology is a way of augmenting, for an individual, particularly in a fast-moving and with modern communications, velocity of the velocity around relationships and the sheer breadth of relationships people need to manage has increased. Our technology is there to help augment that. And coming back to your point around enabling individuals, it's at the center of our overall philosophy, which is give the individuals tools that allow them to do their job better, and as almost like, call it like a Fitbit, if you will, for individual employees around their relationships, which then allows the organization to also be able to make macro decisions around what's happening, because relationships for an organization are a collective asset.
Yeah, absolutely. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's even though it has been an asset, it has not been measured, nor has it been managed effectively in the past. Yeah. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. I mean, the analogy I like to give on that is, in terms of measurement, it's a little bit like the weather. I mean, what's the weather today in San Francisco? It's going to be warm and sunny. And what's the weather in London, where I am right now? Cold and miserable. Right, that's nice, but we can't compare and contrast that. Now, the moment I can say it's 75 degrees in San Francisco and it's 68 degrees here in London. Now we can compare and contrast it. So by being able to measure relationships, we can compare and contrast. Plus, we can also provide a level of longitudinal or sort of time-based analysis, so we can see and compare how this works, how relationships change and evolve over time.
Right, and I appreciate you using Fahrenheit there. That was well done.
That was a stretch for
Yeah, you did well. You did well. So at the end of it, if I am an employee, if I am a manager, and I have my intent to prioritize these 20 relationships because they're going to help me get my job done, advance my career, and all these good things, yet I can get visibility through your tool set that, hey, I'm actually not interacting with those individuals as I hope. My actual behavior indicates that I'm only corresponding with 5 of those 20 in a meaningful way on an ongoing basis. Is that the type of insight that's generated?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one type of insight. And just to extend on that, if you think about a coaching situation, if you have a new hire on board and, you've said, look, to be successful, these are the 20 relationships that you need to build. If I was their coach, I can then on a monthly basis see whether those relationships are being built, and where they're not, I can intervene to help make the right introductions, for example. So by providing objective data as to whether these relationships are being bedded in or not, allows individuals to perform better and allows coaches to mentor or coach their teams better as well.
Got it. Now, we've touched on this in the discussion thus far, but are there specific challenges that organizations have that O&A is particularly adept at addressing?
The answer is yes, and yes and no. The yes is it all depends on their level of call it maturity, if you will, for an organization. We've designed the way that we've designed our solutions. Some of them are designed for very, very specific and even organizations that are at the early stages of starting to play around with O&A. They don't even see it as O&A. They see it as a way of being able to tactically help either managers transition staff in, or individuals to better manage their own relationships, all the way through to sort of very large-scale mergers and acquisitions, for example, being able to understand who to keep, who should be driving the key relationships for the organization with clients, etc., around an M&A. So, in terms of to answer your question, organizations can, there are different ways that organizations are engaging with us at different stages of maturity.
Got it. And I'm really intrigued insofar as O&A is elevating an interest. It's, people are focusing energy and resources to do the work. Yet I also see organizations, struggling with the privacy concerns and the ethics concerns, and they're not like making that leap, yet the ones that are deriving the value that you're speaking on. So those who are pausing based on the privacy and ethics concerns, what do you say to them? How do you get them over the hump?
Yeah, but first and foremost, I'd say that their concerns are valid and they need to be addressed in an appropriate way. The second thing I would say is that, look, scratch beneath the surface around privacy and around ethics. Use let's address ethics first. Use the data that you have on individuals with respect and treat employees with respect. So in other words, be transparent about the use of O&A. Be transparent about what, where and how it's going to be used and for what purposes it's going to be used. But also, as I described earlier on, democratize that data and make it ensure that it's available back to employees, such that they can, to staff members, such that they can do a better job. I mean, ultimately, that's what most individuals want to do. They want to do a better job. Make sure they have that. From a privacy perspective, it's a matter of digging deeper. And we have a chief privacy officer. We take privacy extremely seriously. Just going back to that, one of the things I did, as part of whilst at TrustSphere, was I used to chair the Online Trust Alliance. And that was a not-for-profit that was based out of Seattle, and it was dedicated to the protection of individual privacy online. So we take privacy as part of TrustSphere's approach. We take privacy extremely seriously, and we've built privacy by design into just about all of our technology. In that sense, we're compliant with all the major privacy legislation, and I won't go into the details of it. We've mapped it against the EU legislation, which is the high watermark, as well as the OECD legislation and various other jurisdictions. As I said again, from a privacy perspective, it's really important at this stage for not to analyze content. By not analyzing content, we're not eavesdropping on what employees are saying. We're simply understanding and leveraging how individual behaviors work, how individual behaviors are at play in terms of how people work together and how people collaborate together for the betterment of an organization.
That is a confidence-inspiring response, at least from my perspective. And kudos to you from designing, with that in mind, because obviously it is top of mind for many these days. And it also, begs the question, is this does this have staying power? Is the legislation going to get more stringent? Is it going to be more accepting given the proliferation of data and our ability to analyze that data? What would you say? Is this a fad, or is this going to be around 5, 10 plus years down the road, or is it just going to be in perpetuity given the nature of data and our ability to analyze it?
I think it's the latter. I think that the future is the future, and no one can tell the future with certainty. But certainly what we do know is that organizations are fundamentally changing the way they work. And from an agile organization perspective, there is no other way of being able to really understand how organizations work other than being able to observe them. And in terms of observing them, surveys have been used in the past to do that and to understand networks and collaborative networks. Again, to be able to do this across very large organizations at scale, and in a way that you can actually understand the way that the entire population is working, or a large segment of the population is working, means that you need pieces of technology to enable that. And to a large extent, I guess that's where we sit. Is this a fad, or will it last? Certainly my hope is that it will not be a fad, but I also do think that it won't be, because I think we're fundamentally working in different ways than we've ever worked before. And again, I'll go back to an analogy I used right at the beginning. In some ways, what we're providing to our clients is an MRI of their organization. So it's one thing to be able to observe different pain points from the outside. But if we can, on a non-intrusive basis, provide an MRI of how an organization is working, we can help them. We can help the organization determine where there are blockages, where there are needs for intervention, or where things are going well, for example. So,
got it. And as we start to wrap up here, tell us about TrustSphere and how it's unique relative to others in the marketplace.
So TrustSphere, as a company, we like to call ourselves a startup, but founded in 2011. We're a group around 50 people around the world, based out of out of New York in the US, in London, in Singapore, and in Australia. So we have offices around the world, working with several hundred clients right now in the people analytics space, with some of the number of large financial services organizations, as well as a number of other sort of large telcos and media TMT type organizations around the world, as well as a number of government organizations. What we're finding, what we are as a group, is extremely passionate about being able to look about digital transformation and workplace transformation. We're again a number of a smart data science team that works on a set of algorithms that allow our technology to be meaningful and useful, together with a set of technologists who are practitioners in many ways, who are looking for how do we make the technology that we have available useful back to our clients.
Got it. And you've evolved with that value proposition to become one of the leading players in the O&A space. And how did that evolve? imagine, over the 6-7 years, it was right out of the gate and you just ran super fast, or did it take a while to chop wood and, build the case?
It was the latter there, Al. I mean, when we first started, as I mentioned right at the beginning, we started in the risk and security space. We evolved, and that's where the fundamental technology was built. We evolved that into the sales environment, where we actually worked with a number of CRM vendors to augment and build a number of external networks back into their environment. But what we recognized a couple of years ago was that the workplace of the future is going to be very different to the existing workplace, and the intelligence and the insights that we have, that we could provide, could help accelerate that transformation. And hence, hence our workforce analytics, or our people analytics part of O&A was born. And again, a lot of our investment right now and our energy and effort for the organization, it goes into working with our clients and our partners. And our partners we work with a number of major consulting firms around the world to help transform this help transform the workplace. And in many ways, my personal vision around this is to ensure that we, as we make those decisions around workplace transformation, we do it in an objective way. And by being able to provide objective data, we don't take away instinct, but we augment instinct with data.
One last question, if I may. How can our listeners learn more about TrustSphere and get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, from our side, the easiest way to get in touch with us is on our website. There's a huge amount of information available there, which is www.trustsphere.com, TrustSphere.com, or alternatively, feel free to email me at Manish, which is Manish .goel Goel at trustsphere.com.
Well, Manish, I thoroughly enjoy speaking with you. Kudos to you and your team for what you all achieved, and look forward to seeing you next week at the People Analytics Future of Work Conference in Philadelphia. And look forward to learning more. So thanks again.
Thank you very much, Al, and looking forward to seeing you next week.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks for joining the People Analytics and Future of Work podcast with Al Adamsen. To find other podcasts, videos, upcoming events, and to join the Global People Analytics Network, please visit us at globalpeopleanalytics.net.